She lost her sight at 16. She became a barrister who never lost a word. The last thing Safia Malik ever saw was the number 73 bus. Not the whole bus, the front of it, the route number illuminated above the windscreen, the specific orange of the destination board catching the late afternoon light of a November street in Hackney. She was 16 years old and she was crossing Dalston Lane on her way home from the library, her arms full of A-level history books, thinking about nothing in particular. The bus driver said afterwards that the sun had been directly in his line of sight. The investigators agreed. It was the kind of accident that had no villain, only consequences. She spent 3 weeks in the Royal London Hospital. At the end of the 3rd week, the ophthalmologist, a careful woman who chose her words with the precision of someone who has had to say this before, told Safia that the traumatic optic nerve damage was permanent. Both eyes, total loss. Safia was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "When can I go back to school?" She did not ask why. She did not ask what now. She asked when. That single word was the whole of her character, compressed into 3 letters. Safia Farah Malik was the daughter of a Somali-British community solicitor named Hassan and a British-Algerian secondary school deputy head named Nadia, who had met at a legal aid clinic in Bethnal Green in 1994 and had been arguing productively ever since. They lived in a flat on Queensbridge Road, Hackney, a household where the bookshelves bowed under the weight of law reports in Arabic poetry and English literature, and where dinner table conversation required you to cite your sources. Safia had decided she would be a barrister at age 11, after watching her father lose a housing case for a family on their estate and come home furious, not defeated, furious at the argument the other side had made. She had asked him, "Why didn't you say this?" And she had told him with the calm specificity of an 11-year-old who had been listening very carefully, exactly what she would have said instead. Hassan had looked at his daughter for a long moment. "You're right." He was not a man who said that easily. She had never forgotten it. By 16, she was one of the strongest students at her Hackney Comprehensive, sharp in argument, relentless in preparation, with a memory for detail that her teachers described as exceptional and her classmates described, more accurately, as slightly intimidating. She had been offered a place at a 6th form college in Islington, specifically for its law program. She had been planning her A-levels with the focused intention of someone who knows exactly what comes after. And then, the number 73 bus. The rehabilitation was the hardest thing she had ever done, not because learning to navigate without sight was physically impossible, it was not, but because every adaptation required her to rebuild, from the ground up, a relationship with information that she had always taken entirely for granted. Reading, note-taking, the casual glance at a case file, the ability to scan a room and read the faces in it. She learnt Braille in 4 months, which her rehabilitation specialist described as the fastest acquisition she had seen in 20 years. She learnt to use a screen reader with the particular impatience of someone who types faster than the software speaks. She returned to her A-levels at the 6th form college in Islington, different now, more deliberate in her methods, but no less present, no less sharp. She achieved 3 A's. She applied to read law at University College London. The university was welcoming in the way of institutions that have policies rather than experience. They provided a note-taker and extended time in examinations, and a liaison officer whose job it was to ensure accommodations were in place. What they could not provide was the thing she needed most: other people who had done this before. She was the only blind law student in her cohort. In the wider faculty, as far as anyone could establish, she was the only blind law student the university had ever had. She found them eventually, not at UCL, but online, in a network of visually impaired legal professionals in the UK and the United States, people who had navigated the same path by different routes, and who shared with the specific generosity of people who understand what it costs to figure something out alone, everything they had learned. A solicitor in Edinburgh named James O'Coffer, who had been registered blind since birth and who had developed a filing system for case documents that Safia adapted for her own use. A barrister in Chicago named Miriam Chen, who had lost her sight at 22 and who told Safia, in a video call at 11 p.m. at night, the thing nobody had yet said directly. The courtroom will not be designed for you. You will need to redesign how you use it. That is not a disadvantage. People who redesign things generally understand them better than people who simply use them. Safia wrote that down. She has it still. She was called to the bar at 25. The ceremony is one of the few things in English legal life that has not materially changed in 200 years. The dining in hall, the declaration, the formality of it. Safia's parents sat in the gallery. Hassan, who had been arguing cases in solicitors' offices for 30 years, was visibly shaking. Nadia was not. Nadia had known from the hospital. The pupillage, the year of supervised practice that every barrister must complete before they can practice independently, was where the real education began. Her pupil supervisor, a senior barrister named Charlotte Webb at a chambers in Gray's Inn, was neither effusive nor discouraging. She was exacting, which is what Safia needed. "I'm going to treat you identically to every other pupil I've had. That means I expect the same standard and I will tell you when you don't meet it." "Good." Charlotte had looked at her for a moment. "You'll need to develop your own system for managing evidence bundles. I'll give you the standard approach. You'll need to tell me what adaptations you require." The system Safia developed over the following year became, in the chambers, quietly famous. She organized every document in a case by audio label, a recording of her own voice describing each exhibit's content and significance, cross-referenced by case reference and date. She could locate any piece of evidence in a bundle of 300 pages in under 30 seconds. Several of the cited barristers in the chambers, observing this, began asking her to explain her system. She did. 2 of them adopted it wholesale. In court, she had no notes in front of her. She had never had notes in front of her, not in the way cited barristers had them, because the relationship between a piece of paper and a voice takes a fraction of a second to navigate, and a fraction of a second is time she chose to spend thinking instead. She memorized her arguments. She memorized the evidence. She memorized the names and the dates and the procedural history of every case she argued. She listened to the opposing counsel with complete attention, the kind of complete attention that is only possible when you are not simultaneously looking at your next point on a page. She heard things. She heard the hesitation before a claim that wasn't quite solid. She heard the slight change of pace that meant a barrister was departing from their prepared submission. She heard, in the quality of silence from the bench, which of her arguments the judge found compelling and which needed to be restated from a different angle. She was, in the specific and measurable sense of winning cases, very good. The case was an appeal in a housing discrimination matter, a family from Peckham who had been repeatedly passed over for social housing by a local authority algorithm that the family's solicitors argued was indirectly discriminatory on grounds of ethnicity. The High Court had ruled against them. The family had come to Safia's chambers. She had been preparing for 11 weeks. The legal argument was complex. It required her to unpick the statistical methodology of the algorithm, argue the interpretation of the Equality Act, and rebut the local authority's position that the algorithm was neutral because it treated all applicants identically. She had worked with a statistician. She had read everything. She had listened to the High Court judgment 23 times. She stood before the Court of Appeal on a Thursday morning. 3 judges. The Lord Justice in the center had a reputation for interrupting counsel at the earliest opportunity and pursuing the weakness in an argument until it either held or collapsed. He interrupted Safia 4 minutes into her submission. "Lord Justice, Ms. Malik, your argument appears to rest on the premise that identical treatment can constitute indirect discrimination. The statute requires disproportionate impact. Walk me through precisely how you establish that impact here." Safia did not pause. She had heard this objection before. In her own preparation, she had raised it herself 3 weeks ago and spent 2 days answering it. My lord, with respect, I would ask you to consider not what the algorithm does identically, but what it uses as its inputs. The algorithm is identical in its processing, it is not identical in its starting conditions, and it is the starting conditions, which correlate directly with historical patterns of ethnic residential segregation in South London, that produce the disproportionate impact. Identical treatment of an unequal dataset produces an unequal outcome. The statute does not require that the discrimination is intentional. It requires that the impact is disparate. I will show the court that it is. The Lord Justice said nothing for a moment. Then, proceed. The Court of Appeal ruled in her client's favor 6 weeks later. The judgment, 34 pages long, cited Safia's formulation, identical treatment of an unequal dataset, as the organizing principle of its reasoning. The Lord Chancellor's office requested a copy of the written submission for distribution to local authorities. She was 31 years old. Safia Farah Malik was appointed King's Counsel at 36, one of the youngest women ever to receive the appointment in public law, and the first registered blind barrister to hold silk in England and Wales. She noted this last fact once in a lecture at UCL to the law faculty where she had been the only blind student, and then said, "The first is not a destination. The first is a door. Someone needs to walk through it so that others know it opens." She practices in public law and equality law. Her cases have shaped housing policy, challenged unlawful uses of algorithmic decision-making in public services, and established precedents that are now cited in law schools across the country. She has a small collection of objects on the windowsill of her chambers in Gray's Inn. She knows each one by touch. A piece of smooth river stone from a weekend in the Lake District, a small brass scales of justice her father gave her when she was called to the bar, a braille card on which she has written, in the notation she learned in 4 months at the age of 16, the 3 words that have organized her entire professional life. The card says, "Listen more carefully." It is, she says, the competitive advantage she did not choose, but would not now give back. In court, she stands with a white cane to her left side and the full weight of an argument she has memorized absolutely on her right. The judges know her by now. The opposing barristers know her by now. They know that she hears things they do not. They know that when she is quiet, she is listening, not to what is being said, but to what is not. The number 73 bus runs through Dalston still. She can hear it from the flat her parents still live in when she visits on Sundays. She has never told them what she thinks when she hears it. They have never asked. Some things are private, not because they are painful, but because they are complete, because there is nothing more to say about them that the life itself has not already said better. She speaks to law students. She does not perform her story. She presents it, as she presents everything, as an argument, structured, evidenced, leading to a conclusion. 1. Limitation reshapes method. Method reshapes ability. Safia could not use case files the way sighted barristers use them. She built a better system. She could not read body language in court. She learned to read voice. The limitation did not subtract from her advocacy. It redirected it into a form that was, in several specific and measurable ways, more effective than what she had before. 2. The question you ask in the worst moment defines the direction. When the ophthalmologist told her the damage was permanent, Safia asked, "When can I go back to school?" Not why, not what now, when. The question you ask when everything has changed determines what comes next. She chose a question that assumed the future and demanded only its timing. 3. Complete attention is rare. It is also devastatingly effective. In a courtroom full of people reading their next note, Safia is listening, only listening. The competitive advantage of the person who has nothing to look at is that they hear everything. She says this to the law students not as comfort, but as strategy. If the system was not designed for you, look for what the system cannot give the people it was designed for. That is your opening. I did not lose my sight. I lost one way of seeing. I found several others. The ones I found are better for courtroom work. I am not being falsely positive. I am being accurate.